Who loves to tailgate? The Plato's Closet Fairfax and Manassas locations will be tailgating this Sunday. College students, go back to campus in style. Plato's Closet will be putting out all their college apparel, in addition to gently used trends from hundreds of popular brands. Shop and save up to 70% off regular retail prices. Don't miss the tailgate party this Sunday at Plato's Closet Fairfax and Manassas locations. Plato's Closet is now hiring. Find us in Fairfax in the Greenbrier Shopping Center and in Manassas at the shops at Signal Hill.
Environmentalism hasn't been the popular debate. Sometimes it's just considered to be around animals and flora, but that's not always the case. A lot of the times, humans are also impacted. So it's a combination of all three, but people don't really pay attention to.
Lights, Camera, Azadi is a show that is on a quest to meet personalities. The personalities who have always challenged the status quo. These people are courageous and confident to speak the truth and are best at it. Though the world may or may not agree with them, they always work for nation building. We want to talk to them and understand their perspective. We want to know their worldview, their thoughts, and what gaps do they see in the society, and most importantly, how to live life fearlessly. My name is Vandit Jain, and I am just a medium to get these stories to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 44th episode of Lights Camera Azadi. It is a very special episode with one and only Disha Ravi. Disha is a young climate activist from Bangalore, and she is one of the voices who are at the forefront at the climate debate in India. In this episode, we do have a candid conversation with her. We do enter the episode with some broader topics like climate education in mind, but we sort of discuss this towards the end. In the first 40 minutes, we just spend trying to get into Disha's mind, understanding how she thinks, her journey, and her worldview. I hope you enjoy this episode. If you like what we are doing, please hit the follow button on Spotify, subscribe us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and general stay in touch. Without wasting any time, let us go and meet Disha. For quite some time, I have been thinking of putting my thoughts on paper and share them with you regularly. So I'm thrilled to announce my bi monthly newsletter, Hypothesis. Hypothesis is a newsletter that is the show's extension, a commentary on society and culture as I see it. Here, I want to talk about my observation of the world around me, how I see people to people interaction, families, social structure, a bit of politics, and essentially my hypothesis of why things are. If you would like to subscribe, go to lightscameraazadi.in/newsletter. You will find the link in the show description. I repeat, lightscameraazadi.in/newsletter. Thank you.
Hi all. Lights Camera Azadi is a year old now. While I do this effort part time and after office hours and on weekends, the truth is I haven't made any money out of it. If you think what I do is worth it, it adds value in your existing knowledge base, and you want me to continue doing this, I request you to please support me for an episode that you like. You can go to patreon.com/azadi and make any contribution, big or small, of your choice. To just make a one-time contribution, cancel the charges after you have paid. Your small contribution can go a long way in my endeavor to bring stories to you. 3, 2, 1. Disha Ravi, welcome to Lights Camera Azadi.
Thank you for having me, Vandit.
How have you been? And I must say before we begin that this feels like an achievement unlock. So it's a very very special episode. So good to have you.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm super excited because I listened to one of your previous podcasts, and I really liked it. So I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Disha. And how have you been? How has lockdown treating you? What's up with you? Let's just say that.
Um, it honestly been okay because like no one, like my mother and my father, both of them were safe. Through the No one got COVID, but yeah, health wise, everyone's been mostly okay. With like minor glitches, so everyone's been fine, and I think I'm really grateful for that. How have you been? What have you been up to?
Oh, this is the first time a guest has asked me a question. That's so good. I've been fine. I've been trying to record more and more episodes. I'm also
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of a job change, so I have some
Oh,
time on my plate right now.
And the rest of the time, I've like started in the process. I've started my own newsletter. It's as an extension
Oh
to
my
the
God.
podcast.
That's
So
very exciting. Like, how do people subscribe to your newsletter? Because I'm gonna go subscribe now.
oh wow, thank you so much, Disha. So you go to lightscameraazadi.in and like slash newsletter. And like for those who are listening, this is not like a
This is
sophisticated
not
plug.
scripted.
This is completely
I
not.
genuinely want to subscribe to it.
This is completely non-scripted. Yes, and I have to.
Yeah, I didn't know about the newsletter before.
Yeah, I have to like the first edition is yet to be out. So
Hmm.
I'm hoping to like get it out in the first week of August. But like right now, like in between episodes, I'm just asking people to subscribe for it. I don't even know what will happen. But essentially, I thought that it would be a good idea to like put pen down my thoughts,
Yeah.
and because a podcast has been great, and I see that where does lights, cameras, are they go from here? So I was just trying to answer this question. And yeah, that's all. Thank you for asking me. And so Disha, my first question to you is, uh, how did you at a very very young age ended up becoming a climate activist, and what has been this journey like, and what were like the key turning points that led you to where you are today?
I feel like I haven't spoken much about this, just generally because I don't know, I just feel weird talking about myself, but a lot of it stemmed from my grandparents because they're farmers. And when I was growing up, I heard a lot about the water crisis they had to face. They live in a village called Bandihalli near Tiptur. It's in Karnataka. Um, and growing up and watching that, it was I didn't quite understand it back then because I didn't have any. We didn't have any education on the climate crisis. I just thought it was natural, and this is how things are. And it was only much, much later that I only got full internet access when I was like 18 and I moved for college. Up until then, I did have internet access, but it was in like 1 hour a month or something. So it was only then that I was able to, research on what the issue is and why essentially the cause of the issue. And I think that's really why I started doing what I do. Another thing is my mother also told me stories. This was actually much later after I started. She told me stories on how when she was a child, she'd have to go and fetch water from like wells before she went to school or college. And this was a process they did throughout their childhood. Like all of them, they were all joint families. They lived in under the same house. So all of her sibling and her cousins, they'd all go and do this. This was like a chore they'd do before they went to school. And it was very worrying that this is the state. And, it's gotten worse now. Luckily, not for them because the situation there improved. Thank God for once. The government did do something. But situation around the country did not improve. So that is essentially why I became a climate activist.
And was it like some key moments in your life that like made you realize, in the public's life, of course, that made you realize that this issue is like worth fighting for life, and something like that, something happened?
I think just generally the fact that it is one of the most overlooked issues. One amusing thing I must mention is I once saw a Twitter thread about me that's basically made assumptions on why I started, who I was, and why I started climate activism. And it essentially just said that climate activism is cool, and that's why I did it. Which I thought was very surprising because I don't I didn't know about climate activists before this whole thing even I mean I don't think the general population knew about climate activism before this whole thing blew up. And I don't remember it ever being cool or to talk about, like pun intended. Um, because environmentalism a lot of times is seen as a privilege. But that's really not the case. Like, I get that we have a lot of issues in the countries, but these are issues that are intersecting with the climate crisis. Like having raising awareness for the fact that we don't have enough water to drink or that the air we breathe is not clean is not a privilege. It's not a topic that was ever considered cool to talk about. It's actually a very ignored topic. And I think that's why, that's also one of the reasons that I want to talk about it, because it boggled my mind that this was such a prominent issue. Like, a large amount of the country doesn't have water to drink, and the fact that it isn't front page news is very concerning. And that's one of the reasons why I started.
And you talked about the time spent with your grandparents in areas of Karnataka. How has been that transition from rural to urban like? Can you talk about a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, so I still lived a large part of my life in the city because I never spent all my time there. As a child, I was there a lot, and I was there for summer holidays. But up until I was born there. I was born there, and then we moved to Kudge, which is also in Karnataka, up until I was 2.5. And after that, we moved to Bangalore. And I've lived in Bangalore my entire life, except for 2 years when I moved to Bangalore. But even in Bangalore, I don't live in the city. I live very far away from the city, and the name of the place is quite literally called Halli, which means village. But the villages even in Bangalore are very different from villages there. But I don't think I ever had like a hard time adjusting because I didn't spend a lot of time with my grandparents. It was a lot of holidays spent with them. I mean, I spent all my school holidays with them. But lately, I haven't had a lot of chance to go there. I think just because the whole pandemic, I wasn't able to visit them for a really long time because there was a lockdown. Because they're old, it wasn't safe to visit. And it was only in like later this year, I think in March. I think March, no, not March, after March, April, I visited them because we had to take my grandpa to the doctor. And it was only because of that we visited because we didn't want to endanger them by going from a city to another place. So I haven't spent a lot of time with them lately, but every time I do, it's nothing's changed. I don't feel like I feel like I've also had the privilege of being surrounded, at least near my home. My neighbors are super sweet. They've like gone above and beyond their responsibilities as neighbors to look out for my family because I only live with my mother. Um, and it's the same at the village. Like everyone in the village is family, quite literally family. They're extended cousins and relatives. Um, and they've also always been super supportive, and so I've always felt at ease in my surroundings. So there wasn't much difference in that aspect. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
No, no, it does. It does. Mm.
Yeah, like I've never lived in the center of a city to know what it's
Hmm.
like fully like. To I don't have grocery stores right next to my house. We have to go like a kilometer
Hmm.
out for our grocery store. We actually recently got a grocery store that's like near my house. Because an apartment was built. So up until then now I don't live in like the hustle and bustle of the city to know what it's like. Like I only go there for work. Uh, and my parents also, we did this because we don't like the city
Hmm.
and we wanted to live amidst greener environment. So that was also one of the
Wow.
reasons.
A lot of people will be definitely surprised, Disha, like hearing this side of this part of your life. Don't you think so?
I do think so because I don't know. I feel like um I've noticed that there's just a lot of speculation on my life when from the people who know the least about it. But I don't have like the energy to sit and argue or like clarify for everyone. But I also don't feel like I owe them an explanation, so I don't actively try to do anything about it. But it's very different from what is perceived. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think people will be surprised.
And Disha, tell me this, like how has been your relationship with technology evolved slash changed? Have you become or have we all become a little more cautious, especially like what's happening in the country right now? What do you think about it?
I think I um I'm actually a tech noob. I don't know much about technology, but I do learn. Like I'm really good at like some aspects, but like the more technical aspects of it, I don't know. So I think just this year I've learned more about technology than I planned to ever in my life. And in general, I've learned to practice more secure habits because I've realized that a lot of platforms aren't respectful of your privacy, and I'm not comfortable with the amount of, and no one should be comfortable with the amount of data that gets stored about you. So I think I've just been working with good technology, a good tech, as the tech people say it. Um, so I really enjoy that, and I've made a lot of changes that I'm more comfortable with. Um, just because I've realized that a lot of your digital rights are your, personal rights because you don't want like how is the fact that every single one of your conversations can be read out on public is very frightening. And I've had that happen to me. I don't know if it were actually my conversations or not, but the fact that um, that even occurred was very scary for me. And I think I've had, because of that experience and just general safety, I have switched to good technology.
Hmm. And how have you dealt and how have you and your family dealt with the attention that has come your way, and how it has been in general?
My mother, I'll tell you how my mother has dealt with it first. My mother doesn't believe it half the time. The other half of the time, she tells me stories about like how some journalists harassed her when, like, at home, when she was
Hmm.
home. But in general, I don't do a lot of interviews or um, just media that comes my way because I'm just uncomfortable with the level of attention that has happened. I'm very, very grateful for it because I know this is not something that happens to everyone, and I know that some of my privileges did play out, and I'm very grateful that it happened. Um, but I didn't expect it to happen. I didn't expect to blow out. I didn't expect any of this to happen, and to a large extent, it's very scary because the other day, I think just one of my friend was going out of the country for his job, and I hadn't met him like the whole year, and he was like, "Can you meet me?" And I went out with him, and someone on the road recognized me. It was different when I was in Delhi and people recognized me because the incident was still fresh, but this was months after,
Hmm.
and someone recognized me, and they'll come up to you and be like, "Are you Disha Ravi?" And it scares me because I don't know if that person likes me or if that person is someone who wants to lynch me to death. And I think that's a very, very scary experience. And if I'm being really honest, I haven't read a lot of that went down in the media, and I haven't, even the support I received, I haven't read it because I'm just not ready to read it. I knew it blew up. I don't know the extent of it. I've heard of it, but to a large extent, I think I refuse to believe it. And yeah, I'm very, very grateful that it happened. But it's very scary for me personally, because I feel like I didn't actively want this in my life. And I'm always torn between using it and just completely disappearing from social media and everything. So yeah, that's always there.
Yeah, I think we all face this huge dilemma. Like one point in time, you would like, "Ki, I'm gonna uninstall everything, and I'm gonna get off my digital identity, and I will be fine." But at the same time, this is like become this like very crazy stuff where you're so dependent on it, and you're like your
Yeah,
livelihood and like your life, and it's a part of your life, your friends, your connection. I hate this part, and I totally get what you're saying. Uh,
yeah, like a large chunk of uh, it is on social media. Like I sometimes like even if I want to uninstall the apps, and I do that very regularly too. Um, I I miss out on like conversations with people, and then I come see, and then they'll be like, "Oh, missed out on something important," and that's like not even the worst part. the worst part is you have to stay on there, and even if you divert those important conversations to your, message box, there is like work stuff that you have to come on this on social media to search, and I feel like you can. It makes me question if we can ever truly get off it,
Mm.
and it's just very annoying.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like when you were mentioning about your experience, I mean, I can totally like take it that the process is the punishment here, right? I mean, what what
Yeah,
the trauma one goes through. I mean, forget about like the legality and the actual, what really happens and the legal front, but what the individual goes through and how often they would use this to terrify and vilify a lot of others like you who may be fighting the good fight.
yeah, I agree when you say the process is punishment, because it's going to drag on for years before they even come to any sort of conclusion, and just the fact that you have to wait that long is there's just so many things that'll happen in the middle. So yeah,
Yeah,
the process is indeed the punishment.
yeah. And it's so weird, right? Like one night, your life changes, so it's, yeah, it's very weird. I mean, as somebody who is trying to uh, raise issues via medium which is like an audio, which still a lot of people don't get, still very niche, very limited audience. I too have my own personal fears, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
understandably.
yeah, I know, right? I mean, yeah, like who would like just like edit one part and like put it on the internet saying like this is what this podcast is about, and like, and this becomes like blows out of proportion. We are like we all are like walking on like a very tight rope here.
Yeah, I just the present situation feels so dystopian that some days I'm just like, what is happening? And like, especially with the latest the Pegasus whole issue, I just want to go and comment, oh, this is the plot of 1984 under so many posts. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Like I completely agree. Like this is something you would hear in like in what, yeah, in like James Bond sort of movie, that something,
yeah,
some technology is developed, you just have to give a missed call and like you have all the data. Come on.
it doesn't sound real. Like, I feel like if people have speculations on the fact that this is real, I would completely understand. I would completely understand because it sounds so surreal.
Yeah, unbelievable. uh Anyway, Nisha, like progressing from here, so what are like the pressing issues that are haunting you in your mind that you're trying to raise these days in the past few weeks and months, etc.? Can you throw some light there?
Yeah, so one of the issues that we have been working on is the Korigao issue, that's happening at the moment. They're doing this in the Aravalis. They, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but
Aravali is very near to where I stay. It's in Haryana.
oh yeah, I'm sorry, I
Uh,
forgot you live in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gurgaon. Yeah, yeah. So the essential issue is that a few people who are living on the land in Aravalis. It's forest land, and it has now been declared as an encroachment by the people. But what has actually happened is there are land mafias that have sold the people the land without actually revealing, their intentions or anything, and people bought the land. So obviously they rightfully think that it is their own land, and to a large extent, I also feel the same way. That is my opinion, but um, it is forest land at the end of the day, and the government is suddenly concerned about conserving the land, so they have been uh, evicting the people. The Supreme Court also ordered them to evict the people who are living there, and it's been happening in the middle of a pandemic, and they haven't. provided any rehabilitation facilities to these people. And the rehabilitation plans that they even drew up comes with so many terms and conditions, and they need to have a certain level of income to even sorry, they need to be below a certain level of income to even access this. They need to have documentation, and it just boggles my mind. How do they expect people who are living so far away? Okay, it's not technically so far away, but far away from civilization, to be having all the documentation they need and to be earning below a certain level of income when they make it hard for a lot of marginalized community to have access to making these documents. And how can they even evict someone in the middle of a pandemic before providing them rehabilitation facilities? Um, that is something we've been working on, and the whole event is so worrying. They're being forcefully evicted. They're seeing the house get demolished. So the rehabilitation facilities haven't been provided. They haven't. There are almost 1 lakh people living there. There are thousands of homes, and that's what we've been working on. We've been working on it with other movements to demand rehabilitation facilities. And the UN just came in and this. They said that this is a violation of human housing rights. Um, so we're hoping for some progress on that, and but I honestly don't know how are they going to rehabilitate so many people in the middle of pandemic. And the demolition continues yesterday and today. We've heard from people on the ground that it's been happening. They haven't stopped the demolition, and people are just, it's a really heartless way to go about this. um, like I understand the environmental integrity of the forest. So if you did want to like evacuate them to protect that, why was there no rehabilitation done? Why was there no monetary compensation for this as well as the rehabilitation? And they also didn't. And during the eviction, there was a lot of police brutality that the people had to face from the police. That was really heartbreaking because this is their home. What else are they going to do if they're not going to prevent them from getting demolished? I don't know why, but this always happens. This always happens where the police come in and they decide that it's their own territory to hit people, and they do it. And we're demanding for, for medical compensation as well as additional monetary compensation for those who had to face that, but also just in like morally speaking, in our heads, we're always like, is that enough? And sometimes, a lot of times, I don't have answer to that. So that's what we've been working on. And also, there were flash floods in Dharmashala in India and flash floods around the world. I think Germany in particularly was
Yeah.
scary because so many people lost their lives, but the literal road collapsed and um, like washing away houses. And this was happening in a country that people thought would be safe from the climate crisis for a while. So it was surprising to have it happen. And this happened in New York, but it also happened in Africa, in Uganda, and other parts of the world. And it was all in the same span of a week or 2 weeks. And I think it's just very concerning and, like, I think, like we discussed before, very dystopian. Um, Yeah, so on that, there's honestly nothing much we can do except raise awareness at the fact that this is happening and we need action. But very dystopian times just this whole year.
Hmm. Does it often feels like a dead end, Disha? Like, like you're fighting, and I don't want to use the term like lost cause, but you're fighting a war that may or may or may not win.
I often feel that honestly because it does when all of these things happen, and they happen quite a bit. Like even before the monsoon started, we saw two cyclones that were impacted, and it just like in Mumbai, uh, like 40 people died just this month, just this week. And but even before that, the cyclones hit, and we've the fact that pre-monsoon cyclones are increasing is concerning, and it it does feel like a lost cause because the climate impacts are increasing, but the action we are taking on it is the opposite of what we should be doing. Instead of working on a solution, we have been actively and very, very violently diluting environmental laws. We've been continuing to steal land from indigenous people. We have been mining. We have auctioned off so many coal mines. The whole world, okay, the majority of the world at least, is looking towards moving away from coal. But our country is auctioning off coal mines. And then we're also making it easier to auction coal mines. Just today, I was reading about how the central government is basically giving the central authority over uh, land and where coal mines are situated, and they can decide how to give it to private players, and they're taking away authority from state government, and I think that is very concerning. um, so instead of working towards a solution, we're going backwards, and we're actively working on things that will cause and worsen the climate crisis. So it does feel like we're fighting a very lost cause. But we stay for the small wins because a lot of us, I feel like we've come to this conclusion that we can't not fight. Like it's painful to fight for this, but it's also painful to not do anything because um it's it's a privilege to stop fighting for this because people are literally dying from the climate crisis. Um, and stopping would just mean that we're letting it worsen. We're not holding. We're trying to hold it. Like right now, we're at least trying to hold the people accountable. They're not doing their end of the job and being accountable, but we are trying. And I think I think one thing that we hold on that gave us hope this year was the fact that last year actually that the EIA was, the 20 lakh people sent objections and suggestions to withdraw the draft notification of the EIA, and they didn't like it's a work in progress. They didn't exactly withdraw it, but they did say that because of these many suggestions, we'll look over it. But then they tried passing some 30 new amendments um, as individual amendments that were in the EIA also. But just the fact that 20 lakh people got together to object something was a very hopeful um, movement, like a moment, and the fact that it did at least temporarily stop the implementation was nice. But obviously, it was soon broken by the fact that they tried passing. They actually passed 30 amendments, but yeah.
Hmm. Understood. And Disha, what are like some of like major challenges you face while raising these sensitive issues? I mean, is it like lack of media support, which I can definitely imagine, or a general lack of understanding of the depth of the issue in the public, or is there anything else that you face?
I think it's a combination of all three. People just don't think this is like environmental issues. We have to, even with EIA, it wasn't until the last few months that people actually, started doing this. The first time around, we only had like, I think, at least from FF, we had sent like, I think 2 or 3 lakh objections. And it was only during they had extended the objection period that we managed to mobilize more people. People don't it doesn't garner the attention of the public a lot of times because it's just not palatable. It's considered an issue uh, when and every time and there are environmental issues. It usually impacts the most marginalized communities first in India, at least. So obviously, these communities don't get media attention because that's there are a lot of structures in place, caste, class structures in place that play into it, but also because it's even leaving the media aside, even on like social media, it's just not palatable content for people. They just don't um, interact with it or engage with it. So it takes a really long time to even garner public attention on these issues. Um, Media picks it up very late after we've been going at it for months. Um, so it's a combination of all of it. Um, like I said before, environmentalism hasn't been the popular debate, and sometimes it's just considered to be around, animals and flora, but that's not always the case. A lot of the times, humans are also impacted. So it's a combination of all three: flora, fauna, and people. But people don't really pay attention to that, and that's, yeah, all three of them are equally challenging. Like even my Twitter, I think this is one of the best examples. Every time I make an environmental tweet, no one cares about it. Absolutely no one. Every time I post something stupid or I say something sassy, the internet loves that. The internet loves that. But post something relevant, no one cares about it. And I think that in itself, and that's the same for like the posts we make on like FF. I think that in itself says a lot.
Absolutely. You also mentioned something about UN making a few comments on the issues that you have raised in Ravli. Uh, I have often seen. I don't know. Like, do you think UN, like, what is the degree of impact that UN can make? Uh, what are your thoughts around it? I mean, I often see this as, you know okay, there are human, I mean, essentially the body lacks a lot of power and empowerment by the general structure. They don't have any authority over the sovereignty of the nations. But at the same time, does it really matter if UN makes some comments in our favor, or like it's fine? Like, what do you think about UN's role?
I I agree when you said UN is it doesn't have a lot of power to take action. But for media role, it is important. So when the UN comments on a particular issue, it usually gets picked up by the media. So it starts the conversation about the issue, which is great for the people on ground, because when there is more public pressure, there is more, just legally also speaking, the public pressure does help in the sense of raising awareness on why this is an important issue, and to account for accountability to some extent. So I think to a very large extent, the UN's role is just the fact that they can get a conversation going and nothing else. And but sometimes that can be a lot for an issue as well. So it is more of the fact that a body like the UN said something on it, so the media is going to pick it up. So that is the role they play on overall. Again, I personally have several opinions on what the UN can and can't do, but in this context, I think that's,
No, that's an interesting and a fair perspective, and I think that, I mean, and that should be the expectation also, right? That
yeah,
their entry would just ensure that in the right light. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. I mean, that's a very
yeah,
interesting perspective, and I think that's how one should look at the United Nations as well when dealing with such issues. And like, talking about
yeah.
UN, Disha, tell me this: like, how is the climate conversation different in India, and as compared to, you have been part of international forums, or you have your own international network community as well. So, how do you think that? How's the conversation different in the West, in India, going east toward China and Japan and Indonesia? What is, in your experience, how are things of climate activism playing there, and like how are things panning out here?
I feel like generally there's a little more awareness there when compared to here, which is kind of ironic because the global south will generally feel the impacts of the climate crisis way more than the global north. But since their quality of education is better, a lot of them do include environmental education or climate education as a part of curriculum, like an important part of curriculum, and not just an offhanded subject I think at least I went to like a state syllabus school, and we had it as like the EVS environmental studies was a very half-handed topic, and I feel like a lot of people just go to public schools um, that go through similar situations
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So there's just more conversation and discourse, but at the same time, there's also more disbelief there. But I feel like the general level of disbelief that climate change is a real thing is a debate all over the world. So I wouldn't say that there's more there or less here, but it is definitely debated more there because people are more aware of it. Here, there isn't much conversation around it. Um, yeah, but yeah, it's kind of sad because, like I said, they're the ones who are going to be most impacted by it.
Hmm. And also maybe because in India maybe the conversation is less, but I rarely see conversation around, okay, this is a hoax or climate change is a hoax. I mean, it has started to slowly develop and started to enter spaces, but I have often found
Yeah.
climate conversation relatively being addressed with a better scientific temper. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I've also noticed that, but I feel like that's also because, a lot of people just say, just is climate change isn't a popular discourse in our country also. So I feel like that is also one of the reasons there aren't many debates around it. But the, yeah, I do agree it's definitely handled better here.
And you mentioned something about syllabus that gives us a very that gives us a segue to what we originally wanted to discuss before we talked about a bunch of things. Is how do you see or how would you look at our education system from a climate and environmentalist and environment conservation standpoint? And you rightly mentioned that there is definitely one small book of EVS that we read, we have read at different points in time in our schooling days. But how do you envision the climate studies, if I ask you?
So e- I feel like environmental education in this country is reserved for people who go to exclusive school. Like you find it in the IBs and the ICSE schools, but you don't see it in the normal government syllabus schools, and you don't see it in just the more accessible schools. And I think that's concerning because although we do have, I think most people have a subject called EVS, uh, but I never had it as a serious subject. It was always like this subject for like half the marks of like a main paper, or it would be for like if the main paper was 100, this would be 50, or sometimes it would be 20, and sometimes it wouldn't even be counted. Like midterms wouldn't happen for this. It would only be there for the final exam, and it would be just like a thing. It wouldn't be counted for your final grade. So it makes the whole subject very dismissive because we've grown up in such an education system that prioritizes marks. So you're not going to study something unless you know uh, you're going to be graded for it. That's just how the system and the education system works.
Hmm.
And we're missing out on so much that is happening that is going to impact us. And I think that's very concerning. Like I know I learned some things. I'm not going to deny that. I know that there's an ozone layer. There were some holes in the ozone layer. It was very concerning. I know what the greenhouse gases were, but that's it. They didn't teach us that this is a current crisis, that this is an emergency. We didn't learn about any environmental movements. Uh, we didn't learn about why dams are bad or why coal is bad. It was always pushed as like good energy. Well, and we shouldn't be growing up with that thinking because this is exactly what's destroying the planet. Um, and I feel like by making it uh, a topic that only the 10% or the top 1% of the population can study about, where so even when like a lot of environmental people who do come and fight for this, and they usually end up being, people who've been impacted by it directly, or they end up being rich kids. So it's very hard for there to be a middle ground. And I think that's concerning because everyone should be in this, because we're all going to suffer from it one way or the other. Obviously, one category is going to be more impacted than the other. But if we are going to stop the climate crisis, and I feel like every time I say it, that sounds so ambitious because that's just the position we've been put in. But if we're going to stop it, we need absolutely everyone in the fight, and that's not going to happen unless we make this education accessible to all. And like, even though my grandparents were impacted by the climate crisis, my mother was impacted. I didn't know about it to a very large extent until I was 18, and that feels really late to me because that was so long ago. I could have been doing so much more before, but I only learned about it much, much later. And most of what I know is just because education, luckily, I had internet and I got it free from the internet. But not a lot of people have that opportunity. I think if I knew more about this at school or even at college, for that fact, right? Even in college, I didn't learn much about it, and I think we would have been able to change a lot of conversations around the climate crisis now. Um, and I just generally think education should be accessible to all, and the quality of education should be accessible to all. We can't have different standards of education. I just feel like there's something inherently wrong with that because we're just making, the rich people richer by giving them options. Of education that will take them to jobs that will pay them more, while the other sector of the other sector of the society gets access to education that will probably call any dream that is beyond a particular job ambitious. They'll just trample it down because that's just how it is. And so I'm like very big on advocating for the quality of education to be equal and accessible for all.
So, Disha, I mean, can you talk about like some of your suggestions, as an environmentalist to, redesign our curriculums? What do you think should be improved? And also, from a perspective of the system perspective, right? Like you mentioned that it is given less weightage. So, also from that perspective, what are your suggestions, if I may ask?
I think there are a lot of alternative schooling models that seem to be working great, but unfortunately, a lot of the alternative schooling models are available to, again, the richer section of the society. Um, in the sense where, education or knowledge isn't measured by grades per se. They do have tests. It's not that they don't have tests, but the tests are designed in such a way to test knowledge. It's not about by hearting paragraphs or mugging up pages. And I feel like that'll be a great way to go about. So if, let's say, you read about the environment, but you don't just read about it, you go out in nature and actually experience it. And I feel like that's a very wholesome way of learning. So instead of mugging up pages, you can learn what are the different types of plants, learn to recognize the types of birds, learn conservation of these, and learn survival skills. I think it's very ironic that none of us were taught cooking or to do our own personal
Yeah.
finances, but we all know about the Pythagoras theorem, and we all know about like mitochondria. And why? When am I going to use that?
Mm.
Um, I feel like schooling doesn't teach us basic skills that we need in life. So we really need to reevaluate what we're learning, because if I were to design a thing, I would put gardening on it because everyone needs to know how to grow their own vegetables. I would put cooking on it because, again, life skill. I would put personal financing because, again, life skill. Um, and being in nature, and I get why maths is important and all of that, but uh, instead of the text being designed in a way that is just mugging up things, I'd really like it to be designed in such a way where you use the knowledge you've learned and apply it in real life. And I think a lot of alternative schooling does that. I feel like we should implement that, but in the masses. And I don't believe we don't have the resources to do it. Like our Ministry of Education and just the general government spends crores building a new central vista project. They can spend on education of the country. If they can spend on vanity projects, they can spend on um, the well-being of the country.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I really like this part, Disha, where you say that in redesigning the curriculum, you're talking about that it is important to change the relationship of children with nature, and rather than mugging up, they need to probably experience gardening, or experience growing vegetables, or
Yeah.
experience being in the farmland and experience the plants, etc. That's a very interesting approach, definitely. But also, the second part to my question is, how can we make climate conversation more accessible? And you also mentioned that, because of the power of the internet, you managed to have these learnings. But how do we make it generally more accessible and more adaptable to a wider public and a wider audience? Any thoughts around that?
Um, well, one thing is, yeah, like I said before, I am very, very grateful to the internet because it has opened up a lot of boundaries. We've been able to reach a lot of people we weren't before. But at the same time, unfortunately, even today, the whole of the country doesn't have access to the internet. Um, and we are still figuring out how to reach that category of people. Um, most of our paths have been to find someone else close to that person who has internet access and to take the internet access to them so that we can reach them. Because I think just the past year and a half has put us in a position where we can't physically go to a lot of areas. But I think another thing that has also helped us is translating it to regional languages. Like my language, my mother tongue is like Kannada, and just the fact that we explain what is happening in Canada, we have been able to reach a lot more people than we were before. And a lot of other cities have been also doing that, where they convert whatever we're sharing in their own language, and that way we're able to reach a lot more people, because not everyone speaks English,
Hmm.
and definitely not everyone speaks Hindi. So translating it to vernacular languages is super important, and we managed to reach um, people who we may not have even considered before. So I think these two things are what is working for us right now. When it was off pandemic time, we try to go to the location if it was in the same city, or even if it was in the same state.
Hmm.
But if not, internet is our best friend, and not our best friend at the same time.
And how do you think that do you so generally speaking, and in the global perspective, do you think that this is an issue which global governments are waking up to, or do you think that progress is slow there? I mean, I just finished, like some months back, I finished Barack Obama's A Promised Land, and I saw him talking a lot about it and raising it in the, in issues. And obviously subsequently we see Paris Accord and everything. But
Yeah.
generally, do you think that, apart from, let's say, a few countries in like Western Europe, is this a serious conversation globally, including India? Or governments are not, like,
No.
really, like, not interested, like, don't talk to us about the environment, and like they treat environmentalism as like some the last of the priority?
No, I don't think anyone's taken it seriously. I don't see any countries except New Zealand, where the female prime minister has been taking it seriously to some extent, and Bhutan obviously does a great job. But I don't think anyone else has even come close to addressing it. Sure, they give talks. Sure, they make promises. But the fact that the gap between the promises and the actions are huge. They don't come close to where we need to be to achieve any sort of stability with the climate crisis, because it's so far away. It honestly, they're just greenwashing us and lying to our faces about it. Um, when they're doing something else altogether. And I just don't see anyone taking the action that is needed. And yeah, it's just very concerning.
And I am glad you mentioned Bhutan. I mean, Bhutan is it feels that somehow conserving their environment is ingrained from the top to bottom in from their constitution till their practices. It is it's
Yeah.
fantastic, and I think I can say the same for Iceland also probably. Because I visited these two countries, so this is like something which I've experienced firsthand. Although I
Mhm.
do feel that there is like Icelanders do take their natural beauty probably for granted at times because they think this will be there. But I definitely feel that they are trying to do some measures to conserve it. But I definitely see that the government is very much involved in Bhutan, and they have like strictly ensured that this part of the forest, non-negotiable, you cannot cut it down. Whatever wood you want, whatever construction you want to do, whatever economic development you want to do, it has to be like certain percentage of the land. And that is great for the country, right? And this also shows in the matrix that they define for their success, which is like gross domestic happiness, etc., etc.
Yeah. I wish we had that measure, because feel like we'd be low on that measure, but also I think that's just a great way to measure success. And I wish we had that. I don't know much about Iceland, but Bhutan does. They do have like an ingrained sense of preserving their environment, and I wish we had that.
Yeah, so I went to like I do not I cannot pronounce that name, but so I in Iceland I went and visited a glacier, and people who I met,
Hmm.
uh, locals and people who have been in Iceland said that what you are seeing right now is it has sort of shrunk almost 30 to 40%. And
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, that was quite surprising. And if you can imagine, like, let's say a lane which is, let's say, 500-meter lane, earlier the glacier would be till up to, let's say, like 80% of that lane, and now it only remained till, let's say, 40% of that lane, and it was constantly going down.
Wow.
So and that was like my first real uh, experience, let's just say, with uh, climate or environment at such up close and personal level. And the funny part was Iceland is like such low population that at one point in time I was alone at that glacier, so I remember that moment very vividly in my life. And yeah, and it's not even funny, and um, it's it's sort of surprising that how we have taken this planet sort of for granted. And we all have.
Yeah.
I mean you can't just pin it on one. I mean, right now as I speak, I am in Delhi heat. My ACs are running right now. So I mean, I'm also part of the problem. I'm also.
So one day, I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think I just wanted to. You don't own any gas pipelines, one day. You didn't set the ocean on
Yeah,
fire.
yeah.
You haven't been
Yeah.
through. You haven't. There's actually a whole campaign called Exxon New. Exxon is this big oil company, and they have. I'm like, I'm sure you knew. This is not a. This is not like an explanation first, but like, um, they knew about the climate crisis from as long as the 1970s almost, and they hid it. They've spent billions of rupees into hiding that knowledge from the world. And this was they essentially stole decades from the common people and from fighting for this. And you don't and a large chunk of the population, almost 70 to 80%, just comes from really polluting industries. There are like 90 big industries that are responsible for this. Um, so I get that why, we'd all say, yes, we do take the planet for granted. I'm not denying you on that. But it wasn't your fault or my fault that the climate crisis happened. We don't own big oil refineries. We didn't rupture pipelines in the middle of the ocean and set it on fire. We didn't cause, you know, flash floods. Um, so I think it's okay to use AC if you want to just get by. And heat waves in Delhi are pretty severe. So don't blame yourself for something that wasn't your fault.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful way to explain this, Disha, and I think that sums up really well, and also brings me to like a very final conclusive question, which I often ask uh, environmentalists who have been on the show: is do they think that there can ever be a balance between economic growth and economic prosperity and a good and sustainable environment?
I do think there's definitely a possibility of doing that. The issue is that so far as at least India as a country, we have not invested enough money and resources in exploring these options, exploring sustainable development. Um, while and it's really a lot of people will just come at me and be like, we can't be spending money on that, but we'll spend money on statues, we'll spend money on, like I said, vanity projects. So why can't we spend on better living and saving the planet? It isn't a lot to ask for. I do believe that development can happen at while we also respect the planet. So um, I just wish they put in more money for research so we find out exactly how to do it, because I get that, like you said, Bhutan has done it, New Zealand has done it, and I get that our uh there's like huge difference between these two countries. They're small, they don't have the population we do, um, social and cultural differences. Um, but it just goes to show that if you prioritize different things, if you prioritize the people and their necessities over everything else and over PR that the government does, there is definitely a way. I just don't think we're giving the amount of attention it needs to even get to that way. Okay.
All right. So, Disha Ravi, thank you so much on coming on Lights Camera Zadi. This was such a wonderful, wholesome conversation. I'm gonna remember it for a very, very long time. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me. This was a lovely conversation, and I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Disha.
Cox can help make your home smarter and your life easier. Now you can use your Contour voice remote to connect to your home life cameras so you can view them right on your TV screen using simple voice commands. That makes it easy to keep tabs on what's happening around your home right from your couch. Need to keep an eye on the kids when they're playing outside? Just say, "Show me my backyard camera" into your Cox voice remote and watch them while you're in the house. And if you're waiting for a delivery and want to make sure it's there on time, no problem. Just say, "Show me driveway camera" to check on it with your Home Life HD cameras on the TV screen while you go about your day. When you live in a home powered by Cox Internet, you can stay connected to what matters and let Cox take care of the rest. To learn more about all the benefits of your connected home, visit cox.com/thisishome today. Cox can help make your home smarter and your life easier. Now you can use your Contour voice remote to connect to your home life cameras so you can view them right on your TV screen using simple voice commands. That makes it easy to keep tabs on what's happening around your home right from your couch. Need to keep an eye on the kids when they're playing outside? Just say, "Show me my backyard camera" into your Cox voice remote and watch them while you're in the house. And if you're waiting for a delivery and want to make sure it's there on time, no problem. Just say, "Show me driveway camera" to check on it with your Home Life HD cameras on the TV screen while you go about your day. When you live in a home powered by Cox Internet, you can stay connected to what matters and let Cox take care of the rest. To learn more about all the benefits of your connected home, visit cox.com/thisishome today.